What if you could make more money as a freelance editor without working more hours? That's exactly what we discuss in this week's episode of Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. Hi there, I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. My guest this week, Lori Paximadis, is an experienced book editor who has built a thriving freelance business. She shares her inspiring journey from in-house editor to full-time freelancer and reveals the systems she uses to keep projects organized and clients happy, how to streamline your workflow and speed up your editing process, why improving efficiency in your business is the key to earning more without the burnout, and how to build long-term client relationships through networking and being easy to work with. Whether you're a new editor or looking to level up your business, Lori's practical advice will show you how to build a sustainable, successful freelance career. I hope you enjoy this episode and walk away with ideas to make your business run more smoothly and profitably. Now, here's my interview with Lori. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Hi, Lori. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
So today we're going to be talking about your journey from in-house editing into owning your own business. And then you're going to share some tips with us on how editors can develop systems to help streamline their workflow and work a lot faster so they can make more money, which everybody loves to do. So why don't we start, share your journey with us of how you got into starting an editing business.
Okay. Well, I was the typical multi-potentialite, as they say, interested in everything, and never met a class I didn't love other than maybe gym class and philosophy. But I came out of college with a journalism degree. And, at the end of the 80s, what do you do with that? We were in a recession. I ended up taking a job in a publishing company, a publishing department of a professional association for ceramic engineers. So I kind of got thrown into the deep end, working on a lot of material that I had the brains to understand, but I wasn't trained in it. So, you're kind of looking at sentence structure and like, okay, this is a noun and this is a verb and this is how the sentence all fits together. And I might not necessarily understand what it means, but I know how to make the sentence work. So I started out there. I was there for about 5 years. I had the opportunity to move out to Hawaii, and I grabbed it because, you're 27, I think I was at the time, and why would you not? So I went out there, kind of poked around for a couple of years, working retail jobs, ended up freelancing for University of Hawaii Press, actually shortly after I got there. And, met some people there. They were all super nice. And when a job miraculously opened up at the press, they invited me to apply. And so I did that. I worked in-house there for a couple of years, while still doing some freelance work on the side. And then I was out there for about 6 years. I worked at the press for a little over 4. And then various circumstances, including 9/11 and a few family things, I ended up moving back to Ohio. And at the time, the freelance I had still on the side was making me more money per hour than what I had been making in-house. even considering that it was, technically a government job because it was part of the state university system. And I had really good benefits, which I still do not have anything near those kind of benefits. But it made sense for me to, give it a try and go out on my own and see if I could do this full time. Full disclosure, it worked really great for about a year. And then it kind of fell apart because I had one major client who was paying most of my bills, but taking up a tiny amount of my time. And I hadn't been doing a lot of marketing. I hadn't been doing a lot of networking. And that major client decided that they were giving me so much work that they were going to create an in-house position and hire someone to do that work. So everything disappeared overnight. And I had to go get a real job again. And I ended up working for a book packager for not quite 2 years. It was a long commute. I don't function well in authoritative structures. So that whole time, I kept trying to build the freelance on the side. I made some plans, and then eventually I went back out on my own again in 2007, I think it was. And since then, I have been a full-time freelance book editor. I work on a mix of fiction and nonfiction. Part of the actually, I have some academic fiction now too, if there is such a thing, but fiction published by university presses. So I work kind of across the board. I'm a generalist, which is a little bit weird these days, but it keeps me interested. It keeps me busy. It keeps me really wanting to do the work every day. I've always said I would never want to be an accountant, having to sit and, add the same columns of numbers over and over and over again and do the same thing over and over and over again every day. And one of the things that drove me nuts about retail was, I have to straighten this shelf of books again today. I have to put this back in order again today, doing the same boring thing day after day. So it's really kind of the best of both worlds for me. I have some interesting things to work on. Of course, we all get those boring jobs or subjects that don't thrill us, or authors who, nothing against authors. You have the time and the skills and the energy and the stamina to write a book. Good for you. I don't connect with all of them, but that's okay. I don't have to. So yeah, that's kind of my nutshell. Over the last, I guess it's been 17 years now, 18 years. Oh my gosh, 18 years that I've been full-time on my own. I've kind of focused on building connections and maintaining connections. And what I think is one of the more important things is being easy to work with. Knowing my stuff and doing what I need to do to get the clients and find the clients that I mesh with very well, and that the ones we work together for the same outcome, and we have the same outlook, and it makes the work a lot easier rather than banging your head on the wall every day.
Yeah, I agree that we have such a great job because there's so much diversity. Where, one day you're reading a psychology paper, another day you're reading, something on engineering, or, whatever fields that you work in. It can be a lot of fun. So when you went back into freelancing this last time, how did you go about attracting more clients?
That is a good question. And despite having an advertising degree, I'm not the best one to give marketing advice. I had a very, very lucky break. I was, am still part of the copy editing L list which is hosted by Catherine O'More Klopf, who is a good friend of mine. At the time, it was run by Bill Blinn and Jane Lyle. And Jane Lyle's affiliated with Indiana University, who still hosts the list. But I was a regular reader, was networking on there, talking with various people, learning a ton, this peer-to-peer learning, and just kind of sitting in on other people's conversations about things editorial. But I just happened to be in the right place at the right time when someone posted to the list that they had a proofreading job and the proofreader got ill or for whatever reason wasn't able to take the job at the last minute. And they had this rush job that had to be done in a few days. And was there anyone who could possibly take it? And I just happened to be the first one who responded, but I'm going to stick a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that. I happened to be the first one who responded. She gave me the job. I worked on it over the course of 4 or 5 days, whatever it was. I found a major discrepancy in one of the stories that was told. It was something a story that was told, and then it was referred back to maybe 100 pages later. And the person they were talking about in the story when it was told the first time was, let's say, 9 years old. And the second time, when I was 5, remember I noticed that because that's the way my brain works. And she was impressed with that. And the publisher she was working with was impressed with that. And because of that, I got put on the publisher's freelance list. And I started working with maybe 4 or 5 people there. Then one of them left that publisher and went to another publisher and took my name with them. And I started working for 4 or 5 people there. And then one of those people went on maternity leave and they got a temp in to do her job. And he worked with me on a project. And then he took my name to like 3 other places that he worked. So I ended up, because of the networking, and I think because I try to be easy to work with, I try to anticipate the client's needs. I understand what I'm doing because of my background as a production assistant, a production editor, a copy editor, proofreader. I've done composition. I've done the whole job front to back. Like, I know why we do things a certain way in Acrobat when we're proofreading. So that makes them easier to deal with for the compositor when they're making the changes in the PDF. Because I brought that to the job and, I'm friendly. I like to talk to people, even if it's not on the phone, but I'm building those relationships. That kind of word of mouth is what got me the client base I have today. The only advice I have for people who are trying to break in or trying to build that client base is to get involved in editor communities and get involved in writing communities. And for no other reason than rather than, hire me, sit back and kind of absorb the conversation and, be curious about the things that people are talking about and why things are done the way they're done. It's building and nurturing those relationships that has helped me grow after that first lucky break.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think whether you're working with a publisher, and you're interacting with desk editors, or whether you've got private clients, I think that advice of being easy to work with and being flexible is super helpful, because even though we're not all in an office together somewhere, we are all interacting, and word does get around, and people will just as quickly say don't work with that person as they will work with that person. And
Right.
I've found that, especially with academic clients, you've got, these are professors who are busy and they have their own lives and their own stresses and their own, their kids get sick and things happen, just like I might get sick and need an extra day, they might get sick and need an extra day before they send something to me. And so the more that you can be kind and forgiving and flexible, I think it's, just showing people grace is a mark of a really good editor and business person.
Right. And also to a degree, being able to suss out what they need. I work with individual clients as well, not just publishers, and being able to tell, do they need high touch? Do they need just the facts? Leave them alone. Do they want to be chatty? Do they not want to be chatty? It's not catering to their every whim, but it's kind of like understanding where they're coming from. Just like you would with, a conversation partner at a party. If they're kind of standing over in the corner and, you go and they, snap at you, then okay, you let them be. But, you can kind of gauge a little bit like what kind of person they are and what kind of interactions they like and how much they like to be explained. Like there are some people who, some clients who really like me to explain the changes I'm making. And there are others who just want me to fix it and leave it alone. Just fix what I need to fix. And, I don't need to tell them that, well, this term usually means this, but I don't think you mean that. I think you might mean this instead. Is that right? Some people just want me to fix it and others kind of want to be consulted. And that's a little bit of a skill trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I agree. Different needs for different people, different levels of attention, or, either just do it and get it done, or yes, please explain to me.
Right.
So speaking of efficiency and getting things done, you are sort of an expert in creating systems or helping editors create systems to streamline their workflow. And so we all have, as we get more experience editing, we have a process that we go through when we open a document. And it looks similar but different for all of us, right? We go through, cleaning up the formatting first, maybe running a spell check, whatever it is for us. But there are some tools out there that can make this workflow and this process go a lot more smoothly, a lot faster, and potentially even a lot more accurately than if we're just doing these things ourselves, because obviously there's room for human error. So talk to us about, if there are editors out there who are maybe hesitant to change their workflow. They've been committed to this process for a long time. Why is it important for them to be open to considering these other tools that might be new to them?
So systems rule the world. One of the most important things to understand about editing is that it's not just sitting down in Word and just typing away. When you're running your own business, which is what you are if you're a freelancer, point number one, you are running a business if you are a freelancer. You're not just, floating along on the whims of your clients. You might try to accommodate them, but you're in charge of your processes. And you want to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. There are a number of different ways that you can manage what you do. And it's not important which tool you use to do that, but it is important that you're doing something. It could be as simple as, a list. It could be a list, a calendar, an Excel worksheet. It doesn't have to be complicated, Monday or Trello or any one of the other 80 billion programs that have popped up that want you to pay them $40 a month to manage your to-do list. That is not important unless your brain works that way. It's important to understand how you work and how your brain works. I'm a visual person. I need pieces of paper. I need to-do lists. I have a calendar on my wall, which if I could turn my camera and show you, I would show you, but it lists all of my projects. I have a little card for every single project that lists what it is, what I'm doing to it, what the due date is, who the contact person is it a rush? Is it not a rush? And so when a proposal comes to me, like somebody wants me to work on a project, I can look at that board and I can say, I have 4 slots in my current section. I have 4 slots in my it's in-house, but I haven't done anything with it yet section. And then I have 7 slots in my it's on my radar, but it's not happening yet. And I can look at that and I can say, okay, well, I've got 3 cards in current. I've got 2 cards in ready to start. I've got nothing in upcoming. Okay, maybe next month I can fit that in. That's how my brain works. Other people need stuff on calendars, and that's fine. But you have to figure out what that system is for yourself. And keeping track of all of the little things that you have to do. A proofreading job isn't reading the book. The proofreading job is checking to make sure all the pages are there and in the right order, and that page numbers appear on the pages they need to appear on in the correct position. The running heads are correct. The table of contents matches. The number of notes that are in the notes section matches the number of notes that are in the note paper. If you have the running heads that mention the page numbers that those notes appear on, you have to check those. There are 100 different things on my checklist for doing a proofread. If I do some of them and then go away and work on another project for 2 days, and then I come back to that original project, I don't want to redo any of that work. That would be inefficient. That brings, my income down. So I need a system that tracks, oh yeah, I've already done that. I don't need to do that again. I can keep track of where I am. I know how many pages I proofread. I'm keeping track of how long everything takes me because I'm constantly looking at my metrics. And am I charging enough for what I'm doing? Are there things that I can make more efficient? Am I doing something over and over and over again and it's painful and there's got to be a better way to do this? Those are the candidates for figuring something out to whether it's a tool or a new system or a streamline system. I'm constantly tweaking my systems. This little guy, there he is. Hi, the must, the high, and the nice future. This is my new to-do list daily. Because I was making these big long lists and there wasn't an easy way to prioritize them. And now I made this last night because I needed it. So that's kind of how I approach it. Knowing that I need to keep track. And my system is a hybrid system. I have all my pieces of paper. I have my calendar on the wall, but I don't write down 100 things on that list every single day. I have an electronic to-do program. I use a Mac and I use a program called Things. There's also a program called Todoist, which is very similar. And, there's, Workflowy and all kinds of different ones that you can pick. They're just basically to-do list programs. And I've sort of hacked it to the degree where I've set up templates for every kind of project with every client that I have, because, some have special requirements and all that. Everything exists on those checklists. So the checklists are electronic as far as, yes, I check the pagination. Yes, I check the running heads. Yes, I check the note numbers. But the overall, the big picture, today I'm going to work on the first pass of chapters 1 through 5 in this particular book. That's on the paper. So I can look at that and just glance at that and see what I need to do. And then the details are managed electronically. And that's what works for me. Some people look at that and they look at me and they're like, what is wrong with you? But that's what works for me. And that's important. If you are the type of person who needs everything on your screen and everything in a pop-ups and, you need all that, great, do it. Love it.
I think you're hitting on a lot of really important points. So I want to make sure I pull out some of the big ones. What I'm hearing you basically say is that organization is crucial. And you have sort of the big picture organization, which is what does my calendar look like? And whether that's a paper calendar or like I use Asana, I have it open on one of my screens right now. It's just a calendar view and I put in all my projects so I can see, all right, I'm overbooked this week, but the next week is empty. So I know I can't take any more this week. I have to put it into the next week. And I think a lot of new editors face this challenge where they don't know how long it will take them to edit, say, especially like a book, a big project. How long does it take for me to do a copy edit on 90,000 words? Well, I don't know. You're just going to have to find out in the beginning, give yourself some wiggle room. But as you get practice, I think the general sense, okay, I can edit 5,000 words a day or whatever it happens to be, depending on your schedule. And so you can get that big picture organization of the calendar to help keep you organized for scheduling. But there's also the sort of micro organization for each project where maybe you use a style sheet or a checklist or a, whatever system, again, especially when you're starting out, to remind you, I can't forget to check the heading capitalization, or I can't forget to check the margins and the page numbers and all that stuff. So I think that's a great first step, especially for new editors who are not used to, or who don't have a system in place yet to think about, here's how they can get organized.
Right. And I will underline another piece of that is tracking. I still have an Excel sheet, which I would love to turn into a database, but who has 3 days to learn how to use a database, where I track for each book, if assuming it's an editing project, the number of words it is, what level of edit it is, how long I estimated it would take me, how long it actually took me. So that I have all those metrics and I can look at them. And, after you have a dozen or two under your belt, you can look and say, oh yeah, I have a bad habit of really underestimating how long an edit's going to take, and I need to adjust that. Or I can look at, okay, here are all the fiction, let's just say romances, because I do a lot of romances and I love them to death. But I can look at romances and say, oh yeah, typically I work about 7.5 pages an hour on those, all in. I typically do 2 passes on everything, so it gets a little complicated. But overall, I have to budget so many hours based on the word count. And, same thing works with academic. And in academic, you can even break it down to, how many text pages is it versus how many notes pages, because notes are their own special problem, not problem. I actually love working on notes. I love formatting notes, but it's a weird brain thing.
But they take a different amount of time than same thing with a references list.
They take a very different amount of time, And they're, are you also correlating against a reference list, or are they all self-contained? And then you have to keep track of which ones have been mentioned and which ones haven't been. Like, there's a whole thing there. So if you track those metrics, then you, from the beginning, you can get a better sense of how much time you need to schedule. And then as you progress through the years of your career, you can see your improvements. You know, you can say, well, yeah, I used to be about 5 pages an hour on this kind of book, and, you know, now I'm up to 7. So that's awesome. And if you're charging by the page and not by the hour, you see that little bump in your income.
Yeah, that's another great point is I have an Excel spreadsheet that I've used since I started editing, and I just copy it over to a new one each year, and it lists the project, and I track my time, and I convert it to words per hour, and I put the rate I'm getting paid, cents per word, and then it calculates my hourly rate. And so when I was deciding between different publishers and editing agencies, I was able to see, oh, I'm consistently making $80 an hour with this person or this company and $40 an hour with this company. Gee, I wonder who I'm going to stick with, you know?
Yes.
And I think the second point, or the next point that you made, is that when you charge that way, either per page or per word, your editing speed, by increasing your editing speed, you're increasing your earnings and your effective hourly rate without even raising your rates. So let's talk about what are some tools that people can use to help them increase their editing speed.
All right. Let's do the simplest one first. Text expander. There are other programs that do the same kind of thing. Phrase Express is one of them. Even Word, working within Word, you can use their autocorrect as a kind of text expander. What this does, for those who are not familiar with text expansion, it allows you to type a short code. Within Text Expander, they call it a snippet. And that expands into a longer thing once you type the code. And they can be little things or they can be big, long things. I have a Text Expander snippet. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but you can use special characters or special keys to kind of tell the program, yes, this is a text expander snippet rather than just regular type. I use the close square brackets just because it's there and I don't have to hit shift. So I do bracket, first contact, and it spits out, I think I'm up to about 15 paragraphs on what I want to tell people who have said, hey, do you want to edit my book? It it basically says, thanks for getting in touch. I offer 3 different kinds of editing services. Here's the definition of this one. Here's the definition of that one. Here's the definition of that. If you're happy with what you've created, you probably want this one. If you feel you need a little bit more, you probably want that one. And then it goes into estimated time, the schedule time. Turnaround for this is usually 6 to 8 weeks. Turnaround for that, whatever. It talks about the formatting services I offer, because I do that as an add-on and not as part of the editing service, and I do charge for that. It talks about payments, and the editing services too. They give a very general range. I do project fees, which I calculate based on word count and what it needs, and the overhead that I need for each project, because that's more of a fixed cost rather than a word-based cost. So I calculate that separately. But it's this whole introductory email that I can get by typing those couple of characters, and then I can go in and adjust it as I need it. You can get really interesting and deep into Text Expander, where you can do drop downs. You can have it calculate a date however many days in the future. So you can say, when if you generate an estimate, you can have it automatically say, this estimate is good until whatever date, calculate it 90 days out or 180 days out or whatever you want to do.
Oh, that's brilliant. I didn't realize you could do that.
There is so much more there that even I haven't touched yet, and I've been using it for at least a dozen years. You can use it for things like queries. I have a handful of set queries that I use over and over again. One of which is author, : does the edit reflect your intention? Do I want to type that 90 times a day? I do not. So it's bracket, int. Open the comment box, bracket, int, pops that query in there. I have a shortcut that just pops author : and then I can type my own query. I have special queries for special circumstances, like things that I have to explain several times over. So I just wrote those up as Text Expander snippets, save the fingers.
Yeah.
None of us are getting younger.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me when I discovered those tools. I think you're right that for somebody who's never used any kind of macros or anything like this is a great place to start because it's very easy to learn it. I don't use Text Expander though. Hearing you talk, I'm going to have to look into it. I use Word's auto text tool. And so I have that set up. It works the exact same way. It's just limited to inside Word where you type a few characters for a shortcut and it pops up the sentence revised for repetition, or this is not cited in the tag, whatever, just like what you were explaining.
Right.
And then I use a program called Beef Text, which works I think it's just like Text Expander. It works anywhere. It's PC only though. That's the downside.
Okay. Yeah.
And I use that for my emails, like you were describing when when you're responding to an inquiry and you explain, here's my services, this is what this includes. I think when I first started, I had like an email draft in my drafts folder and I would copy and paste. And that helps, but even that gets to be annoying and it leaves more room for error. And so I think if anybody doesn't use these tools, this is a great place to start because it saves so much time. And again, we are human, right? We do make mistakes. We have typos. If you're retyping things over and over, you're going to have a typo. But if you're using this software or these tools, it's less likely that's, if you've saved it, the same thing, it's going to recreate it correctly every time.
Right. And you're not forgetting to include critical information in your reply to people. You're remembering to put in the expiration date on your quote, which can be very important when someone comes back to you 4 years later and says, "Oh yeah, you said you would do it for this, and in the meantime, my rate is double what it was 4 years ago." All those little hard-earned pieces of knowledge that you get when you're running your business, and then you can. There's a central place you can add it, and you don't have to. Okay, it's an email draft. What did I call it? Where is it? Go find it. Copy it. Paste. No. It's. I want to say Text Expander is like $40 a year or something. And the beauty is you can set it up so it will email you and it will, based on your typical typing speed, it will tell you how much time you have saved by using it every year.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And if you do it weekly, that was a little much, but
Well, when I was starting, of course, you're starting a business, you want to be careful about your budget and how you spend money. And so I think initially I adopted, the auto text and the beef text because they're both free. But then you have to start thinking, $40 a year or whatever it is, that's, what I make in half an hour.
Right.
And it's saving me probably hundreds of hours in a year. So it's totally worth it. But yeah, that's
a calculation that a lot of new freelancers, they have a hard time getting past that free thing. They have a hard time spending money. And I think part of it is this mindset shift that you have to recognize that you are running a business. You have to invest in your business. You cannot hobble along on your, Word 2003 in the year 2025. I mean, you can't. You have to invest a little bit in your tools so that you can work with the clients in the way that they expect. And even when you invest in those tools or whatever processes you need or whatever equipment you need, as freelancers, it's still such a tiny little part of what we bring in. I mean, it's a minuscule percentage of my income compared to what I spend to make that income, as opposed to, running a retail store or, having to be in a place where you have to, rent an office and, hire staff and all that stuff. I mean, this is such a low investment business. And if I do nothing else, I want to encourage people to look at those little investments that you can make that have that big impact. And Text Expander, at least for me, is one of them. Because it's saving me time, and that time I can spend on doing more actual paid work, or I don't know, shocker, take some time off. I mean, who wants to do that? It's saving my hands. I mean, my hands and my eyes are my tools. I mean, as much as my computer is, as much as Word is. If you're not, banging 1,200 characters out on the key to write an email telling people the same thing you tell everyone else, twice a week, 3 times a week, you're making an investment in your own physical comfort as well.
Yeah, and I think what helped me was thinking about, okay, I'm going to spend $40, or I'll use the example. I decided to hire an accountant when I started my business. And I think we pay about $350 a year, and she does the taxes and everything. Mm-hmm. And at first that can sound like a lot of money, but I think it would take me probably at least 12 hours to do my taxes, at least. And right.
Brain fatigue, and dread.
What is my 12 hours worth? Like, if I were spending that 12 hours editing, I'd be making $1,200, Right. And so that compared to $350, it's an obvious benefit. And so what's the next step then? If maybe we could talk about either wildcards or macros, sure. Or what, if people are adopting these initial tools, what is the next step that can save them some more time?
The next thing I think is wildcards. So wildcard find and replace works within Word. And it allows you to search for patterns rather than words. So the typical example is you have a page range and the author has used hyphens in between. Wildcard find and replace lets you find the pattern of any number 0 to 9 with a hyphen, followed by any number 0 to 9. And then you can replace it with whatever that first number is, an N dash, and then whatever that second number is. Very simple example. You can get a lot more complex than that. If you were using typical find and replace, you'd have to go through every combination, which I was very good at math, but it was so long ago. I couldn't even tell you however many that was. I think it's like 100 different combinations, to be able to do that in an automated kind of way. But you don't have to do that because you have this tool that will do it. It's built into Word, and it's using a series of parentheses and square brackets. So square brackets allow you to define a range. The parentheses create a wildcard group, and then in the replace box you can use actual backslashes rather than forward slashes, to designate which group you need where. It's, even if you don't have a programming brain, you can grasp this. This is not awful. There are some online resources, but the one that I want to point out is, come on, focus. There we go. My dear friend, Jack Lyon. He wrote this, probably 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. It's a $10 book. It's available on Amazon and I think directly from Jack. And also, I believe that the Perfect It website, I think, might have it as a free download on their website still. Maybe. You'd have to look. I'll look that up, and if I can find it, I'll send it to you for the show notes.
So for anybody who's listening and not on YouTube, it's a book by Jack Lyon, Lyon, called The Wildcard Cookbook for Microsoft Word. And yes, we'll link to that in the notes. Yeah, and
Jack is a really good teacher. I've heard him speak a few times, had a few conversations with him. Just a really good guy and easy at breaking things down so you can understand it. And it goes through step by step and kind of teaches you, okay, here's how you do this and here's how you do this. And there are examples, and Jack himself is an editor, so he kind of understands the sort of things that we're looking for. And it saves a lot of time when I'm working on any kind of academic work. I'm using that N-replacer search all the time, which I have actually built into a macro, which we'll talk about in a minute. Talk about briefly in a moment. You can use them for, let's say you have an author who's tends to spell people's names in odd ways or in multiple ways. So you have an author who has spelled, let's say, Mohammed 16 different ways. You could do a search for capital M, any string of letters ending in a D, and then a space. And then you could go through and check all of those rather than having to, kind of eyeball skim it or remember. There are all kinds of things you can do with wildcards. And once you get good at them, you can start to figure out how they're more applicable. That kind of leads into macros. And macros typically use wildcard find and replace to, they don't necessarily use find and replace, but they use the similar kinds of expressions and sometimes wildcard find and replace to find things and change them for you automatically or pull them out for you so that you can see whether they need to be changed. Macros are automations, and they're written in Visual Basic language, which to me is not entirely impenetrable, but it's not something I know off the top of my head. After a while, you can start to see the patterns. But the good news is you don't have to write it from scratch. Jack Lyon also has a book called The Macro Cookbook for Microsoft Word. Similar kind of idea where he works through it step by step and shows you how to do that. And then we also have the wonderful Paul Beverly, who is based in the UK, and he has also written a ton of macros, a couple hundred of them, specifically for editors that work to do the things that we normally do, like reversing names. So instead of first name first, last name last, it switches them and puts a comma in between. Or you can search for certain phrases and change them into something else, or highlight them for you to give a little more scrutiny. One of the best macros I have, which is not one that's publicly available, but it's based on, I think Paul Beverly has a very similar one. It's a macro that will take a word that you've highlighted, and depending on what that word is, it will change it into a different word. So in fiction, you're typically spelling out numbers. So if I highlight the number 13 or select the number 13, it will, you hit the macro keyboard shortcut and it will spell it out without you having to do anything. And you can populate that macro with any combination of things that you need. The one I have, it switches that to which, or is it which to that? It switches that to who. So in the context of fiction editing, like it makes more sense, because these are it takes common errors and it allows you to apply a quick fix to them. So again, you're saving time, you're saving keystrokes based on pattern recognition, things that you've noticed that authors do a lot. I like to say that if you have done something tedious 3 times, it's time to look at a macro.
That's a great data point. You're right. Yeah, because we tend to think like, oh, I've already done it a few times, I'll just keep repeating it.
Keep
and it's
going.
like, no, stop.
Right. Yeah.
Fix, go use the system. Don't do it yourself anymore. Yep. So wildcards are symbols like parentheses and brackets that you can use in a find and replace search for a more targeted way of finding and replacing things. Like you were using the example of the number ranges. If you're going to change a hyphen to an en dash, you don't have to go through every hyphen in the text and determine if you need to change it to an en dash.
Right.
Whereas macros, and I don't even go into the Visual Basic. I just record it using the macro recorder tool. And essentially you're telling...
get that to work. Yeah. I have never been able to get that to work properly.
Well, so essentially at macros, you're telling Microsoft Word, here are the steps I want you to take. I want you to open the find and replace box. I want you to search for the hyphen. I want you to replace all of them with an en dash, or whatever those steps are. Like you were saying, I want you to find the number 13 and replace it with the word 13. But it's more sophisticated. Like it's not only that you hit a keystroke and it automatically goes through that whole process of opening the find and replace and doing blah, blah, blah. But you're able to do more sophisticated searches. The Paul Beverly, I mean, anybody listening, I highly recommend you go to his website. He's got a whole book, like Lori was saying, that of these macros, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. But I would say scroll through them and just find one to start with that you think would be helpful. The one I really like that I use all the time is Citationalize. And it is it compares the work cited in the references list with those cited in the text to make sure, cross-checking. And so you're not having to manually go through and search for like an open parentheses and see was Smith 2002 cited in the references list. It does that for you, and it generates a new Word file that compares the in-text citations to the references by year. So you can, it starts with the earliest year cited and goes to all the way to 2025. And so you're able to scroll through that Word document and see, where it does everything match up, or where are the problems that I then need to go and address. And I think, like you were saying, it saves brain power, it saves your eyes. And it also, any of us, if we were to do it manually, we're going to miss things, but it reduces the chance of error there. Yeah.
Yep. And I think you had a very good point too. It can all be overwhelming. All of these tools can feel overwhelming at first, but pick one thing that is taking you too much time, one thing that it just irritates you, that you have to do it over and over again, and pick that one. Figure that out. Figure out that search, figure out that macro. And macros are you can also use them as kind of saved searches too. So once you figure out that wildcard find and replace, you can save it as a macro and then just run it, so you don't even have to type into the find and replace box anymore. But start with one. Don't start with 10 because it's too much. Learn how it works and then go, oh, okay, I can do this now. Maybe I can do that.
Yeah, I agree. And just for one more example, and then I think we could talk about this all day, the two of us, but for everybody else's sake, we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, they're like, what?
I have a macro that, I know that every time I open a document, I want to check for double spaces and extra spaces at the ends of paragraphs. And so I have a macro that I just hit the key and it corrects all those things, so
Yep.
It's so much faster than having to do it yourself. But yeah, this is such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing this and for helping to get people started, because it really can change your business and change your life, and just make the tedious parts of editing so much faster and so much easier. So aside from the suggestions that we've given to save time, if you were talking to a new editor, somebody who's thinking about going into editing or who's just started their business, what's one or two pieces of advice that you would give them to help them along their way?
Well, like I said, I think taking the approach that you're running a business, rather than feeling that you have to take everything that comes along and you have to, jump through everyone's hoops that they want you to jump through, look at it as a business and look at it as you get to set your own rules and your own policies, and you can decide which clients you want to work with. It's harder in the beginning, but if you go into it with that mindset, and maybe you work with a client that's not an ideal client, but you understand why you're doing it rather than just taking it because it's there. It's a means to an end. It's more experience. It's more under your belt that you can then apply to something else. That would be the number one thing, understanding that, you're not necessarily stuck with whatever happens to come your way. You do have some control. The other thing is to be curious and keep learning. Language changes, language flows, spellings change. I remember being in my first job and people were horrified that somebody might not want to put a hyphen in email. Like the world was going to explode and fall apart. And it was awful because everyone would think that they meant the French enamel. Like, why? Don't be that person. Watch. Participate in online communities, or if you're lucky enough to have in-person communities for editors, make those friendships, make those connections, follow the conversations, whether that's on, there are a ton of editor Facebook groups. There are now Slack groups and Discord groups. Copy Editing L is still around. Join the professional organizations, the Editorial Freelancers Association, ACES, CIEP, Editors Canada, Northwest Editors Guild, IPED in Australia. Have those conversations and, keep learning and keep curious and, know that things change and shift, and it's kind of interesting to watch, actually, as you get to be an older editor, and you can say,
I think a lot of people might picture us editors as like dusty old antiquated, whatever. We're just people who are delving down into our books and, not keeping up with the times. But I found that editors are really on the forefront of changes in language, whether it's, there's debates in the groups about capitalizing Black versus white or Indigenous, or, the singular they. Like we're the ones that are discussing this and debating it. And often it's the authors, the academics in particular, who are, behind the times, sort of. And I'm having to explain to them, like, it is okay to use the singular they. We are, academia is doing this now. And
1375.
Yeah, it was the first
day
time.
Has been around since 1375. It's okay to use it.
Yeah,
I swear.
So it is really, in so many ways, it's such an exciting career to have. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing your time with us today. And so if anybody out there would like to work with you, either as a client to come have you edit their book, or maybe some editors who want to work with you somehow, how can they reach you?
Okay. The easiest way to get me is email. I am Lori, Lori, at loripax.com, loripax.com. I have a website, loripax.com, and I have a separate website for the work that I'm doing with systems, which I'm just starting to gear up with now. There is a mailing list sign up there, even though there really isn't much of a mailing list yet. And that website is systemsandshortcuts.com. It also has a Facebook page that goes with it if you're on Facebook. Although, like I said, not a lot happening there yet, but I'm in the process of ramping that up.
Perfect.
And I thank you so much for having me. This has been a great conversation, and I always learn something when I talk to people, and helping think it through and put it into words is a good help for me too.
Yeah. Well, we'll put all those websites and details in the show notes. And thanks again for sharing your knowledge.
Great. Thanks. You're welcome.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.